He never expected to become the subject of his own research. For decades, Dr. Alan Verdin worked quietly in the lab, studying molecules, running clinical trials, and decoding the language of aging written into our DNA. He had helped develop models to predict cellular damage, published papers on mitochondrial dysfunction, and even advised global pharmaceutical companies on anti-aging pathways. But despite all that knowledge, he felt something slipping. When he turned 60, he noticed the quiet signs. His joints stiffened earlier in the day. His energy dipped sharply by mid-afternoon. Words once summoned effortlessly took longer to arrive. And perhaps most painfully, he began forgetting the names of colleagues, people he had worked alongside for years. It wasn't alarming at first. After all, aging was expected, natural, predictable. Still, something about it bothered him. He had spent his whole career understanding why bodies age, and suddenly, his was doing it faster than he could accept. So he made a decision. No press release, no biohacking headline, just a quiet promise to himself. If I can slow it in the lab, maybe I can slow it here, in me. And with that, he began the smallest, most surprising experiment of his life. Not with injections or gene therapy or million-dollar procedures. It began with breakfast, a small plate that changed everything. Dr. Verdin didn't start by overhauling his life. He didn't move to a mountain or buy a cryotherapy chamber. Instead, he began by changing what he ate first thing each morning. He eliminated the bagels, the fruit juice, the granola bars, the yogurt with healthy labels that were loaded with sugar. In their place, he created what he called his cellular stability meal. It wasn't flashy. It didn't trend on Instagram. But it was built with surgical precision, each element chosen for how it would speak to his biology. Every morning, he prepared the same plate: half an avocado, a small fillet of wild-caught salmon, gently cooked in olive oil, a side of sautéed kale or spinach, sprinkled with turmeric and cracked pepper, a single slice of sprouted whole grain toast, toasted to a golden crisp. He ate it slowly, without screens, without distraction, sometimes with classical music in the background, sometimes in silence. To most people, it would look like a nice, simple meal. To him, it was something more. It wasn't just breakfast, he would later say. It was information, instruction, an anti-aging signal I sent to my body every single day. The fats told his cells they were safe. The proteins said, repair. The greens whispered, detox. And the absence of sugar kept his insulin flat, his inflammation low, and his mind clear. At first, he didn't notice much, but after a few weeks, he woke up and realized something rare had happened. He felt good. Not stimulated, not powered through, just stable. His energy didn't spike and crash. His thinking was sharper. And most remarkably, for the first time in years, he slept through the night, deeply and without interruption. It was subtle, but to a scientist like Verdin, it was everything. Because subtle is where biology begins to change, rewriting the narrative of aging, one bite at a time. In the first few months, Dr. Verdin kept his experiment quiet. He didn't announce anything. He didn't track every calorie with an app. He didn't chase numbers on a smartwatch. He just listened, not to data, but to his body, and it began speaking to him in surprising ways. He noticed he was less irritable during morning meetings. His skin looked less dull in the mirror. His heart rate, once elevated during moments of stress, now remained steady, even during long conference calls and tight deadlines. It wasn't just physical. His memory, once dotted with embarrassing blanks, felt sharper. He could quote full paragraphs from medical journals he hadn't read in years. He recalled names, papers, pathways, like a light being slowly turned back on. But perhaps the most unexpected transformation came in his posture. He stood taller. Not because his spine had magically straightened, but because he was no longer bracing against aging. He had stopped fearing time. "I realized," he once said, "aging isn't something that suddenly happens to us in a decade. It happens every morning when we decide what kind of signal to send our body: inflammation or peace." And for the first time in years, he was choosing peace. Every meal became a repetition of trust. Every choice, a way of saying to his cells, "You're safe, you're supported, you're not under siege." This shift, he believed, was the real reason the damage reversed. Not because he hacked time, but because he stopped attacking himself one meal at a time. Lessons from the lab. Why the body responds to stability. Long before Dr. Verdin changed his own habits, He had seen the science unfold under a microscope. In his lab, he had watched what happened to human cells under stress. Real, measurable changes in DNA expression, mitochondrial performance, and inflammation pathways. He remembered one study in particular. It was a simple experiment. 2 groups of mice, identical in genetics, were placed on the same calorie intake, but one group had a predictable, consistent feeding schedule. The other group's mealtimes were random and erratic. The results? The group with consistency lived longer, had lower inflammatory markers, and showed fewer signs of age-related cognitive decline. What changed? Not the food, the rhythm. And now, years later, he realized he had become the mouse in his own experiment. His daily breakfast, steady and unchanging, wasn't just feeding his body. It was creating a biological rhythm, one his cells could rely on, one that told them, repair is possible, you're no longer in survival mode. In biology, stress isn't just psychological, it's chemical. Erratic eating, unpredictable blood sugar spikes, cortisol surges, they all send the same message to your DNA. Defend, conserve, survive. But when the inputs become calm and steady, nutrients timed right, no sugar floods, anti-inflammatory molecules delivered daily, the message changes. Grow, heal, rebuild. And for the first time in his life, Dr. Verdin wasn't just reading that in journals. He was living it. 1 avocado, 1 piece of salmon, 1 quiet morning at a time. A morning ritual that became a life philosophy. As the months turned into years, the morning routine that began as an experiment evolved into something deeper. A ritual, a grounding practice, and eventually a philosophy of living. It was no longer just about biological markers or reverse telomere loss. It was about how he met each day and what that said to his mind, his body, and his longevity. He would wake naturally just before sunrise. No alarms. The first light through his window marked the beginning of his daily rhythm. He stretched quietly, not like an athlete, but like a man making space in his spine for breath and stillness. Then came the walk. 20 minutes, no headphones, through the same tree-lined neighborhood. He listened to birdsong, the crunch of gravel, the rhythm of his own footsteps. This gentle movement primed his insulin sensitivity, but more than that, it cleared his head. By the time he stepped into the kitchen, his body was ready. He didn't multitask. He didn't reply to emails while he cooked. The act of slicing avocado, flipping salmon, and arranging his plate became a form of respect, not just for his food, but for the cells waiting to receive it. He chewed slowly. He paused between bites. Sometimes he gave thanks, not out loud, not religiously, but in his own quiet way. What began as a meal plan was now something more profound. It was a message to himself, spoken without words. Today, I will live deliberately. I will not hurry myself into disease. I will not feed chaos. I will nourish stability. And that, he believed, was the difference between living long and simply lasting. The cost of simplicity in a world obsessed with hacks. Not everyone understood him. Colleagues asked why he didn't try the latest peptides, or NAD+ infusions, or the endless array of supplements flooding longevity clinics. Some even joked behind his back, calling him the avocado guy, as if consistency were a punchline. But Dr. Verdin didn't mind. He had spent years reviewing research on interventions that produced temporary spikes in energy or biomarkers, only to crash later. He knew the truth most people didn't want to hear, that the body doesn't need to be hacked. It needs to be heard. What he had built wasn't flashy, but it was sustainable. And that was the secret. The greatest irony was that the things he did, the walking, the avocado, the salmon, the slow eating, were so simple, most people dismissed them outright. But he kept coming back to one idea. The body is a system designed for balance. If you give it the right input every day without interruption, it begins to trust you again. And when it trusts you, it repairs itself. Slowly, quietly, powerfully. So while others chased novelty, he chose rhythm. While others layered interventions, he subtracted chaos. And year after year, test after test, scan after scan, his body responded the same way, by getting younger. The proof was in the silence. He never intended to publish his personal transformation, not at first. But the changes became impossible to ignore. His blood work came back cleaner every year. Inflammatory markers stayed low. His resting heart rate dropped. His cognitive scores stayed level, while others in his age group declined. He noticed his joints no longer ached in the cold. He recovered faster from illness. He went nearly a decade without a prescription. But the most profound proof wasn't in the numbers. It was in the silence. The absence of symptoms. The absence of panic. No creaks in his bones when he stood up. No lost thoughts halfway through sentences. No pills lined up by the sink like guards against decline. People always ask, how do you know it worked? And for him, the answer was simple. Because nothing hurt. Because I woke up and forgot to feel old. Because I stopped preparing for decay and started living in the absence of it. He didn't measure youth in birthdays. He measured it in the ease of motion, in the stillness of mind, in the quiet strength that returns when the body is no longer in crisis. That, to him, was the real reversal. Not the clock, not the calendar, but the calm. What the mirror didn't show, but time revealed. When Dr. Verdin looked in the mirror, he didn't expect to see a different man. The crow's feet were still there. His hair, once thick and black, was now a soft silver. He never chased cosmetic youth. That wasn't the goal. What changed was underneath. He could walk 5 miles without fatigue. He could read dense research for hours without losing focus. He could meet new people and remember their names, their stories, their details, even weeks later. And most of all, he could feel time slowing down. Not because the clock ticked any slower, but because his body had stopped rushing toward failure. It was no longer fighting, no longer burning out. It was simply functioning, like it was meant to. What made it even more remarkable was that his transformation happened with no audience, no social media, no product launch, no applause. Just a man, a plate of food, and a decision repeated every morning for over a decade. That quiet discipline became the strongest anti-aging tool he ever found. Not because it stopped time, but because it made time irrelevant. He didn't care about being young. He cared about being well, deep into the years most people fear. And that made all the difference. The one change you can make without money, medicine, or equipment. People always wanted him to simplify it. What's the one thing I can do to age like you? He would smile because the truth was both easier and harder than they hoped. Decide who you want to become, and live like that person already exists. Then repeat the decision every morning. He didn't believe in motivation. He believed in design. Designing your day, your meals, your mindset around who you want to be in 10 years. And for him, that began the moment he cracked open an avocado, flipped a salmon fillet, and chose to sit at his kitchen table instead of eating on the go. He didn't need fancy supplements or a biohacking lab. He needed stillness, intention, and the humility to say, if I can't master the small things, I'll never master the big ones. That's the thing most people miss. It's not about adding more. It's about subtracting the noise until what remains is solid, nourishing, sustainable, repeatable. That's how he built a 15-year reversal. Not through magic, through mastery of the ordinary. What he taught without ever teaching. Dr. Verdin never wrote a book. He declined most podcast invitations. He didn't turn his story into a business. And yet his students, colleagues, and even neighbors began changing. A junior researcher who once relied on energy drinks and vending machine lunches started preparing his own breakfast, quietly, with care. An old friend from grad school began walking every morning at sunrise, leaving his smartwatch behind, carrying only stillness. His niece, who once feared getting older, began asking different questions. Not, how do I stay young, but how do I stay sharp, focused, grounded? That was his legacy. Not a formula, not a method, but a shift in the questions we ask ourselves as we age. He reminded people, not with slogans but with example, that health isn't something you buy. It's something you return to when the noise fades and the rhythm begins. He never claimed to stop aging, but he showed that aging doesn't have to mean decay. It can mean refinement. It can mean depth. It can mean peace. Sometimes with the right rhythm, it can even mean reversal. Why he believed anyone could do it? People assumed he was special, that he had rare genes or decades of knowledge that gave him an edge. But he always disagreed. He believed the real reason for his transformation was something anyone could replicate. I picked something small. I gave it meaning. But I never stopped doing it. It wasn't the nutrients in the food that made the difference, though they helped. It was the message repeated every day. You are not in a crisis. You are in control. He believed that when the body stops bracing for damage, it finally begins to rebuild. And the rebuild, done slowly and silently, is what creates resilience. So he told people, start with one meal, not to fix everything, just to prove you can still direct your future, because the greatest illusion of aging is that you're powerless. He proved that, at 68, you are not. His final years and the one thing he never stopped doing, even into his 70s, Dr. Verdin kept the same breakfast. Friends offered to cook for him. Restaurants offered special menus. He always declined politely, because it wasn't just food anymore. It was a ceremony, a ritual, a reminder that he was not a victim of time, that aging was not a punishment, that the morning was still his. He didn't need to track his biomarkers anymore. He already knew how he felt. Clear, stable, grateful. And when asked if he feared death, he said no. Because what he feared wasn't dying. It was losing control of his mind before he was ready. And now he didn't fear that either, because he had built a fortress, one bite at a time. Dr. Verdin's story isn't about salmon or avocados. It's about rhythm, about patience, about making one small decision and repeating it until it transforms you. You don't have to do everything. You just have to start with something and do it so consistently that your biology learns to trust you again. If his story moved you, if it sparked something in you, like this video and share it with someone who's searching for a path forward. And don't forget to subscribe to Human Health Hub, because the way we age is changing, and your story might be next. You're not powerless, you're not too late, and you're never too old to begin again.